I woke up in hospital to the nurse staring at me while I slept. I spent my New Year's Eve and Christmas in hospital, so yay go me. I am 14 years old, and I was in a pretty bad accident. My dad was T-boned by a drunk driver, and a piece of metal almost completely impaled my leg. I really did escape death. This happened not even 3 hours ago, and I can't get back to sleep. Thank God I'm going today. There has been this nurse. She looks like a really normal and nice person. The thing she's said over the past couple days have just given me the creeps though. My leg will sometimes start to leak blood, and when she just needs to redress it, she would rub my leg randomly. She was not putting cream or any type of medical rub. She would just rub it. Nowhere near the wound either, like on the other side always. I would ask her what she was doing, and the answer changed from testing to pain to massage to feeling for lumps. All while doing the exact same thing every time she did it, uncomfortably long as well. She would make this comment about how I had a little of chest hair and how it would come in once I was a man. She would make this comments like ladies love men with scars and stuff like that. I woke up 3 hours ago, and this nurse was standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. I did not move. I do not think she knew I was awake, but I had my eyes half open, peeping out, looking at her. She was literally just standing there looking at me. I turned over to suggest that I was awake, and no joke, I saw her leave the room and walk into the hallway. What do you suggest I do? Do I tell the doctor or one of the other nurses? Creepy Christmas. This is my first post, and first ever day on Reddit, so please bear with me. When I saw Let's Not Meet, I knew I had to share one of my own not-so-pleasant stories. It was Christmas Eve, and I was a freshman in high school. My family had been split up for some time, so normally we trade off of Christmas Day and Christmas Eve every year. And this year, I'd come home early from my grandparents' Christmas party, while everyone else was at my aunts and uncles, celebrating at another party. When I was dropped off, my cousins offered to stay with me for a couple hours, yet I declined. I thought I could watch some of my new DVDs and get some alone time in the house, which is a rarity. I noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street, but didn't think anything of it, considering it was Christmas Eve, probably a neighbor's relative or something like that. After I got inside, I locked the door, grabbed snacks, and started to settle down. I hadn't been home for more than 15 minutes when there was a knock at the door. I unlocked the door and opened it only a crack to see a man standing there. Dark hair, glasses, slightly overweight and dressed casually. He didn't look like much of a threat, but my stomach dropped. He asked, "I was wondering if the car outside, is it for sale?" I told him I didn't think so. "Is there someone here I can talk to about it?" I said, and quite stupidly I might add, "No, you can come back another time," and shut the door and turned the lock as fast as I possibly could. He reached for the handle immediately and started pounding on the door. I heard a string of profanities and the pounding stopped. Terrified, I was crawling on the floor to the phone, hoping he wouldn't be able to see me through one of the windows. Then I heard the noises. Our house had an open garage door, and it led through to the laundry room, where the door lock was broken, and no one had bothered to fix it. Just then, I heard a man yell, and I saw the man through the window run to his car and drive off. My uncle had gotten him just in time and scared the man off. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't made it home in time. Sadly, we didn't get a plate number, and nothing ever came of it. But I'll never be home alone on a holiday again. Christmas Shopper. I am not a writer, so please forgive errors that this may not flow as well as I would like. I am doing the best I can. A little background information first. This happened about 4 years ago. At the time, I was around 8 months pregnant, so very noticeable, and was doing some Christmas shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 at nighttime. I finished up my shopping and headed out of the mall towards my truck. At this mall, there's a road that goes around the mall, and parking is on the other side of this road. Therefore, you have to cross the road to get to the parking area. As I am leaving the store, I happen to notice a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked in my direction and made eye contact. I looked away and kept going. At the same time, there are two men that walk past him to go into the mall. He never looks at them or says anything to them, but kept his eyes on me. I noticed that. He started to walk in my direction, but I just kept on strolling to my vehicle. Then I hear, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being Southern has its downfalls, and one of those is having it ingrained in you to be polite. I simply just asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said, "Could you help me start my car? I think my battery is dead." I may be Southern, but I'm not that polite, nor am I stupid. Please remember that. I am very much pregnant, and a woman walking alone in a parking lot. If he was really having car trouble, it is likely that he would ask a pregnant woman for help, rather than the two men that just walked past him? Doubtful. At this point, I know it's time to go, so I just say sorry, I can't help, and keep on walking, a little faster this time. I still see him out of the corner of my eye following me. I have my keys out and am ready to go as soon as I make it to the truck. He's still coming. "You really aren't gonna help me? I just need to jump." Again I said, "Nope, sorry." I finally get to the truck, unlock it, and jump inside. He is practically running towards me now. I lock the doors and try to get the key in the ignition, but I was shaking, and at that moment, the damn key just would not fit into the ignition. He gets to the truck and hits my window, saying, "I just need your help for a minute." Now I'm starting to get angry and yell, "No! Get the hell away from me!" He grabs the door handle and tries to open my door and screams, "Just open the door!" Here's where I lost my cool and made a split-second decision. I have my concealed carry license, because there have been other reasons that I needed protection that will not get into here. However, I did have my gun in my console that I do know how to use. When he tried to open my door, my only thought was to protect my child and myself. I rolled the window open, grabbed the gun, and pointed it right in his face and said, "I'm not going to tell you again, get the fuck away from me." He stood there for a moment, in shock, I am sure. In that moment, time stopped. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew that I was prepared to use the gun if he made any move towards me. He didn't. He didn't say a word. He turned and ran. I know. I should have gotten the hell out of the Dodge, but I couldn't move then. All I could do was just sit there in shock. I was terrified of not only what he may have done to me, had I not felt that something was wrong, but also, I just threatened to kill someone. Not a situation I ever want to be in again. However, should it happen, I still have that gun. And it is loaded and ready to go. So, man at the mall, I hope we never meet again. Creepy Christmas cards. This is a weird story, but I still can't figure it out. But I got to think of it now since it's almost Christmas time. If anyone has an idea of what might be going on, or have any tips of what to do, please share it. I'd be very grateful for any help. A little over than 4 years ago, I moved in with my sister Ellen, who is 2 years older than me. She got the apartment around June 2010, so when she got a Christmas card the following Christmas, addressed to someone named Ida, we didn't think much of it, as we thought it probably was for the person who lived there before us. One thing about the card was odd though. The only signature was a male name, and then the name of a town. That particular town is known for its mental institution for dangerous or insane criminals. There's only like 4,000 people living there, so the institution is what you think of when you hear the name of the town. We brushed it off as a mistake, figuring the person who lived there before didn't give the new address to the one sending the card. We had almost forgotten it when the same thing happened the following Christmas. It was signed with the same sender and receiver as the year before. Now, a little creeped out, since we now remember that the person living there before us was an old man who passed away after living there for decades. We brushed it off once again since nothing could be done. Now this is when it gets even weirder. My sister got both of our parents' surnames since they didn't marry until a month after she was born. She had decided to use our mom's name, which is more in common, and I decided to use our dad's name, which is one of the most common surnames in Sweden. This is important, because the next Christmas, in the year 2012, I had moved back home, about 20 miles away in the middle of nowhere. A couple of days before Christmas, my sister came to live with us during the holidays. The next day, there was a new card in our mailbox. It had my sister's address on it as usual, but it was now waiting for her in our dad's mailbox. The card couldn't possibly have gone there by the mailman, since there is no connection between the two addresses. Still, it had prints on the stamp that proved that it had been sent with the mail. The only explanation I can think of is whoever sent the card must have picked it up at my sister's when noticing that she wasn't home, and then somehow, probably through Facebook, figured out where she was. There is also a possibility that the cards were meant for me. This is starting to get creepy, and I would really appreciate if anyone has any advice on this. If something is unclear, feel free to ask. P.S. I'm almost 100% sure that it's none of our friends doing this. It has been going on for far too long, and none of them are the type that would joke in this way. Christmas in a hunting cabin. So, this happened at Christmas a couple years ago, when I was spending the holidays with my parents and little brother along with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. We live in a suburb in Ontario, but we were venturing out into the woods for Christmas, an idea that my parents had had for a while now. They always loved the idea of being out in a hunting cabin during a Christmas with their families. I'm a 22-year-old female, but at the time, I was newly 18, and my little brother Tom was 11 years old. We're really close and do everything together. We also had a dog, a German Shepherd called Trigger, who came along for the ride too. He's a real softie, but can be really overprotective, especially for my brother Tom. We left from our house on Christmas Eve at about 2 p.m. and climbed into our dad's truck, filled with all of our stuff and presents for his extended family. Tom and I were really excited, winding each other up, and my parents were having friendly conversation as we moved along the road. We arrived at the village near the cabins we were staying in, and caught up with my dad's sister Billy, along with her husband and 3 other kids. They didn't converse for long, but Billy was a bit unsure of where to go from the village to get to the cabins, so my dad helped her out by writing down the directions. We soon got back on our way and arrived at the cabins at around 4 p.m. They were a cluster of them sort of spaced out around the woods. Each family had a cabin, and there was one where everyone could just meet up with a pool table, a swimming pool, and all sorts of those things. It was the kind of place where we could just all chill together and enjoy each other's company. Anyways, the weather was really cold when we arrived, and the snow was falling all around us. So as me and my brother unpacked our things into the cabin and settled in for the night, my dad started a fire whilst my mom made our dinner. It was great. The Christmas decorations were already up, and we played a few board games as the night got darker. Dad, Tom, and I decided before coming on the trip that we'd go hunting sometime, so we planned to go the next day. I've been a few times with my dad, but this was Tom's very first time. He was only there to watch us though, as he was too young to shoot. It reached about 10 p.m. at night, and my brother and I were getting a little bit tired, so we decided to go to bed. My dad kept his rifles in a bag, which he kept under the bed I was sleeping on. He'd usually keep it in a locked box, but thought there was no point since we were going hunting the next morning. Tom and I were sharing a room at the end of a cabin, facing a flowing river. The view was beautiful. Tom and I fell asleep with our dog, Trigger, lying at the bottom of Tom's bed. Now, this is where things begin to get creepy. It was about 3 a.m. when I awoke to Trigger growling. I did not find this particularly unusual. because my dad suffers from insomnia, so sometimes he can't sleep. He actually sits in our sitting room at home and watches some TV, and like I said, Trigger is extremely overprotective and growls at any noise he hears. But that's when I noticed that there was no light coming from under my door. My dad never just sits in the dark. I whispered to Trigger, telling him to be quiet as Tom slept, but his growling soon turned to barking, which woke Tom up. He asked me what was going on, but I said Trigger must have heard some deer or something outside. After all, we were in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, our bedroom door swung open and the light switch was turned on. My eyes stung as I tried to focus on whoever it was at the door. It was my dad. "Were you two laughing just now?" he asked. As I turned to look at Tom, his eyes wide and his face pale. "No," I replied, as he moved over it towards the curtain, pulling it back as he looked out into the pitch-black wilderness. "What are you looking at?" Tom asked, as our dad closed the curtains again. "Nothing. Just go back to sleep." I was kind of creeped out that my dad didn't say anything about what he was doing, but he turned our light off and we tried falling back asleep again. Of course I couldn't. I was wide awake for the rest of the night, flinching at pretty much every noise. It was about 4:30 a.m. when I finally drifted off to sleep once again, but it must have been moments later when I heard strange crunching noises coming from outside our window. I was sure this wasn't some sort of animal. It sounded like footsteps. I had this overwhelming feeling of fear, and I pulled the covers over my face, sweat beginning to cover my forehead. I then heard a faint tapping on our window, which lasted for a good few minutes. I was petrified. I couldn't move. Trigger was awake by this point, as I saw his face turn towards the window, his ears pointed and listening intently. The tapping started again, but louder this time, causing Trigger to bare his teeth. What happened next was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. "I know you're in there, little guy," this deep and husky voice whispered as a horrible shiver went down my spine. "Why don't you come out here and play with me?" Initially, I was filled with rage. I thought it was bound to be one of my cousins playing a stupid prank on us, so I leaned over and peeked through a gap in the curtain, ready to give them hell for scaring the shit out of us. But standing there wasn't one of our cousins. It was a creepy old man who was around 60 years old. His hair matted and his clothes looked dirty and ancient. He was stroking the window with his hands, breathing on it as he spoke. I went into protective mode. I didn't know what else to do. I grabbed my dad's hunting rifle from under my bed and pulled the curtain back. "Get the hell out of here, I'll shoot!" I felt adrenaline rush through me as this creepy man's eyes widened and the most terrifying smile appeared across his face. Trigger began barking louder than I'd ever heard him bark before. My parents obviously heard the commotion and came running through to our room, turning the lights on. My mom screamed as she saw the old man through the window, Trigger fiercely continuing to bark at the man. My dad yelled at the man, telling him that the police were on their way, but the man legged it back into the woods. Tom was petrified, but I was angry more than anything else. How could some sicko do this? I was extremely glad I had the rifle. The cops caught the guy just a few minutes later and arrested him. I found out a couple days later that the creepy man was homeless and living in the woods, and he was suffering from a lot of mental issues. It scares me to death to think about what could have happened to my brother if I hadn't been there. We spent the remainder of Christmas Day at the cabin, but we stayed in our Aunt Billy's cabin overnight. There was no way we were sleeping in our own after what had happened. We went home first thing on Boxing Day and never looked back. My dad only told me the other day that he knew someone was hanging around our cabin, so he intentionally left the rifle under the bed in case I had to use it in self-defense. He did that because he didn't want to scare any one of us. He called the police after he heard the guy laughing outside of his bedroom window, singing nursery rhymes. So safe to say, that was the scariest experience of my life. So, weird, creepy old guy in the middle of the woods. Please, let's not meet again. Christmas and a corpse. Okay, so I've known for a while I wanted to submit the story but felt odd about it, since I'm still friends with some of the guy's family, and would feel really like a total shitbag if it was seen. However, I've been home with the kids reading today, and getting pissed that I read all your stories and was fresh out of creepy material. So, be a part of the solution, I guess. Here we go. I am a member of the slam poetry scene. Basically, it's an excuse to get people to listen to performance poetry by adding a competitive element to things. After running through the small scene in my city and wanting to branch out and push my career further, I started visiting places within driving distance that I could spit. This led me to Charlotte, NC. I started at their local team venue, where you compete to be part of a squad that goes to a national competition every year. I was doing well and was accepted into the local crew pretty readily. This led to longer stays and features at some of the other venues in the city. I started going to one that was particularly popular and good for selling CDs. That's where I met him. He worked as a barback, occasionally get on stage and shared frankly shitty poems. He was the brother of the house and everyone knew and liked him. He started flirting with me more and more, although in my loose days, searching for acceptance and love everywhere, something always kept me leery. I gladly accept the drinks he sent over, smoke his weed with the group in the stockroom between the sets, and hang out at parties and the events. I always had the tickle in my gut warning me not to get too close, but over a year or two, we continued to become friends. After a while, though, he started calling and texting more often, poking me on Facebook daily, sending messages about wanting to be more than just friends, that he wanted to find a snow bunny, yes, I'm white, he's black, and settle down. Again, I never really entertained it. There was something gnawing at me, the crazy in his eyes, too hard to miss. I eventually moved to Denver to take a position teaching poetry and work at a friend's law firm. The second Christmas I was there, I got the call. A friend from Charlotte relayed the following. He had found his white girl and gotten married. They seemed happy at first, but slowly began fighting more and more and more. It spilled over into the venue, and often they had to be separated by friends from physically attacking one another in public. One friend, later thinking back, remembers the last time she saw them together, him pushing his wife, followed by her throwing a drink in his face and scratching his neck deep enough to draw blood. She said after the couple had been dragged away from each other, she sat with him and smoked a cigarette. She said she laughed and said, "You guys are going to kill each other." Around Christmas last year, his wife just stopped coming to the bi-weekly events. They both attended regularly. He explained away that they were on a break. Time goes by, no one really questions that they hadn't seen or heard from her in a while, thinking she was breaking from the whole scene in order to put distance between herself and her husband. Her parents, however, hadn't heard from their daughter since the Thanksgiving dinner. They would call him, he would say everything was fine and blow them off. This continued until a week after Christmas, knowing their daughter would never miss a holiday without at least a call. They call the police, send them to the couple's home for a well body check. The cops arrive, knock on the door, and are let in. They ask him where she is. His reply is that she's in the bedroom. He shows them to the room, and there she lay, dead for weeks, rotting in their bed. Oh, and he killed their little dog, too. During this time, he had been attending events, hosting hip-hop nights, even publishing a blog on making a marriage work on one of the local organization sites. Never once letting on that every night he was going home and sleeping with his murdered wife corpse. The sickest part of it all, he has children from another relationship, a daughter whom he gets to celebrate every other holiday with. That Christmas, they opened gifts, had dinner, cuddled up on the couch, and watched movies less than 100 feet away from her decaying stepmother. I don't know what would have happened if I'd ever taken him up on the offer to date, but I do know me and my guts are going to stay on speaking terms, and I will always, always listen. Christmas carols can be creepy. This was probably the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. A couple years back, a mate and I were traveling into the city on the train. We were just sitting there, just admiring the girls wearing all their summer clothing. We pulled into a station not far from the CBD and noticed a man get on the train. Nothing really strange about him, besides the fact that you got an odd feeling around him. He began to walk up the carriages as the train pulls out of the station. My mate and I continue talking and notice a father with his son and daughter, probably no older than 8 or 9 years old, just chillin', chatting away when the guy walks past them. Yeah, the creepy guy. He slows down and looks at the children, then begins to sing Christmas carols. He just starts to walk away but still singing. My mates and I converse about how odd that is, but figure we only have not too long till we're in the city. The man walks back to the father, son, and daughter, and stops and turns to them, and begins to sing a new song. I'm not sure of the song itself, because I was ready to punch this guy in the face, figuring he was a pedophile or something like that, and the only line I remember hearing was, "Sweet little virgin, all tender and mild." We, unfortunately, were sitting on an angle in which we could see past his sunglasses and see his eyes. They were popping out of his head and staring at this girl. While ready to get up and say something, the train pulls into a station and the man left. An overwhelming relief just come over me when he left, but I've seen him since then, and I've always been freaked out by him. One winter morning. So this occurred many years ago, but it will forever stay with me and change my views on allowing my kids to ever have their own separate phone line. It was a few weeks after Christmas, and my parents had gotten me my own personal phone with my own separate phone line, because that was the cool thing back then, before the cell phones were big, and I'd given my friends the number because who wouldn't, right? Anyways, it was about 3 a.m., and I've been sleeping with my phone begins to ring. I thought, that's odd. Who can be calling this early? We all have to be up for school in the morning, so I laughed and answered it though. But all I could hear was breathing on the other end. Again, I laughed it off as someone just messing with me and hung up. I tried returning to sleep, but my phone rang again. This time I answered it and said, "Who is this?" Nothing, just breathing again. At this point, I was beginning to get irritated. I told him to stop calling me and hung up. Lay down again for about 30 minutes, when my phone rang for yet the third time that morning. I was mad, so I answered and said, "This isn't funny, I'm trying to sleep. I have school in the morning, stop calling me." This time there was a reply. It was a man's voice. It sounded very gravely, and he said, and laughed, "I can see you. You're very pretty. Why don't you come in and play in the snow with me?" With that, I hung up and started crying. I ran to my parents' room and woke up my mom, telling her what had just happened, and she woke up my dad and made me go tell him what had happened. So they both get up and my dad goes into my room and checks the windows and everything else, makes sure all the locks on the doors are locked, and proceeds to tell me that it's just someone playing a sick joke and that everything will be fine, and tells me to just unplug my phone from the outlet. So I finally go back to sleep until my mom wakes me up for school. I get up and start getting ready, open my blinds to my window that leads to the backyard, and noticed on this very frosty morning that there were handprints all over my window. I called my parents and they're totally freaked out. My dad immediately calls the police. The police come out to take a report and look at all the evidence, and they decide they wanted to go to the backyard. Sure enough, there were a set of footprints in the snow that led right back up to my window. They had gone from the front of the house to the back of my window, back to the back door, and back to the front door. The police think the guy had tried to get into the house.